last time, Alex, that you and I talked, we were doing an interview for Axios on HBO. It was the depths of COVID, and you were in an attic.
A barn, yeah.
I will say, it was a very nice barn.
Yeah.
So you're one of the greatest builders that's ever lived. And I can tell you from personal experience that you're very generous to entrepreneurs who are coming behind. Once again, you were ahead. Palantir builds products for a hybrid world. How would you say that what's happening globally, global politics, affect the businesses of every builder in this room?
Well, first of all, delighted to be here, and hopefully some of my relatives are watching the introduction, because from their perspective, I'm a failed academic. But please watch. And then I would say Palantir is really a we thing, and one of the reasons, I think main reasons, America is outperforming in industry, and especially in high-tech industry, is we actually work together in teams, which seems to be hard for other places to replicate. We built Palantir on the assumption that the world was disjointed and violent, and you had to prepare for a world where you would have a hybrid, global, but not completely globalized economy, so you would need to be able to share, but not with everyone. By the way, we built this for the Intel community, and what typically people call civil liberties is nothing other than an architecture which allows you to share things selectively. It's like we were building based on our conviction. We were motivating people based on our conviction. We attracted, because of our conviction, the very best partners. And I think one of the main reasons we did well was we were very focused on, what Silicon Valley 1.0. What did Silicon Valley 1.0 do? It built things for the government that were valuable and then exported that know-how technology to the rest of us, which made us all happier, wealthier, better people, and not focused on, distributing division in the form of consumer internet, which has left us all actually emotionally poorer. And gets you bad partners. We ended up first in the Intel community with, I think, a list of, when we DPO'd, one of the critiques of us was, well, you only have 100 clients. And I would tell people, yeah, but look at the 100 of clients. They're and by the way, I view them as partners. Yes, we only have, the best special operators in the world. We only have the best clandestine services in the world. We only have some of the best companies in the world. Yes, we're a limited number of people that use Palantir. And then we built a lot of products, to quote Sham, who's talking from kill chain to supply chain. I think it's and we've built things all along the way, and, I'm very proud of that. And I am also very proud. I think, look, America is a very unique, appears to the outside world, hard to understand place that produces the most interesting entrepreneurs and companies and business people in the world, bar none. And to the extent we can support people like people in this room and others, it's a huge honor.
So there's so much firepower in this room. I'm very quickly going to bring you into the conversation. It's going to be a good conference. When you walk in, I was getting my name tag. The first person you run into is Jack Oliver. So we're going to come to you for questions very first. But first, Alex, who do you think are going to be the winners and the losers in this new world you just described?
We in America, both internally, like if you ask people at Palantir, how good is Palantir? They'll be like, well, we do this well, we do that well. Yeah, the batshit crazy CEO his jokes aren't always funny. We kind of underestimate what we have and what's special. And I would define it as an ability to build companies around an idea in a team culture where the innovation really has to be disruptive. And we're very, very able in this country compared to any other country in the world to adapt. So, for example, the Palantir or the IC products we were selling 10 years ago are not at all the same. When we first brought Foundry to the market, people were like, well, data integration. Then we built data integration plus decision-making that powered COVID distribution, vaccine distribution around the world, and many of the businesses in this room. It was, pretty outside the norm what we were saying. And then now it's like this ability to change and adapt and run your business based on new and different ideas and change leadership and build things anew or maintain the traditions that have gotten you to where you are plus innovate. So I think a very, very big winner in this is going to be industry in America, to the point where it creates a lot of externalities. I spent a lot of my adult life in Germany and wrote my dissertation in German, and very comfortable in the German-speaking world, especially in like Alt-Alemannischen Länder, so southern Germany, Austria, Liechtenstein, West Switzerland. But it's, if we are not smarter than they are, but in the end, there is adaptation is the form of intelligence that matters, and teamwork. So I think the U.S. market, U.S. industry, U.S. defense, and allied defense is just going to massively outperform. But we are everyone in this room is a global economy and involved in a global economy, and that there are a lot of difficulties. We're looking at a Europe that probably will struggle over, even as I think we come out of our difficult times maybe in a couple years, but they're going to struggle with tech adaptation. The tech scenes are just uniformly underperformant. And then you have, wars, soon to be big wars probably. And so, I think there are lots of opportunities, but you have to be very adaptive.
Soon to be big wars. What do you mean?
Well, I've been, at Palantir, like our position was like 7-8 months ago, we were warning that the Ukraine war would happen, that it wouldn't be, the consensus in America was it would happen, but it would take 2 weeks. The consensus in Europe is it wasn't happen. And the view that we were saying is it's going to happen. Ukrainians are going to do better than the Russians expect, and then there's a real heavy, chances of the war metastasizing are much greater than people think. This has all become somewhat of a banality. It was not a banality 7 months ago. And the reason why I thought this was just, we've been involved in deploying disruptive pieces of software for almost 20 years. And people, whether it's in industry or in governments, typically, historically, software has been something you pay for and you hope at the end of the day you at least get a pleasant dinner. But it isn't going to actually, and we've moved to being it will provide some value to, in some cases, I believe, in our case, it can transform your business or your military operation. And, Russia, as an example, they spend $65 billion a year. We spend 800, but I think they assumed a large percentage of our defense spending was not efficacious. And they really underestimated the power of disruptive technologies, especially software. And that just creates, in these situations where you disrupt and the other person isn't prepared for it, it creates dislocations.
Do you think the nukes will be used before the war in Ukraine is over?
The question is the precise, when we were saying, watch out for this, we need to be on top of this, people thought the odds were 0, and that's why I was basically chased off a couple stages for saying it. I think there's a running 30% chance that we will see the use of nuclear weapons. And then also, I think the risks of something happen in Taiwan are much higher.
How many years? What's your frame?
Look, we're in the business of building software products. It happens that, but I think in the next year or so, it's quite dangerous.
And so when you said soon to be potential big wars, those were the two.
Yeah. Well, our conflict, we have a ongoing, rather in the open conflict with China. America is much more on top of this than many of our allies, and then we have, so look, the world that we thought we were getting 20 years ago, where we all become happier and more peaceful, clearly ain't happening.
So just before we walked on stage, Lisa Gordon showed us a headline. Just today, Putin said, the world faces the most dangerous decade since World War II. True?
Obviously.
And are you an optimist or a pessimist?
Well, I mean, those are definitional. I think, when you build software products, you try to build them based on the way the world is and the way to transform the world into a better place. And I don't think that's optimism or pessimism. I think that's transformism. And that's what we should all be in the business of doing, whether it's our businesses or our country. And, again, we are we collectively, those who are using our product, those who aren't, we're trying to kind of build things that make our businesses, our institutions actually work. And to do that, you have to be both realistic about the challenges you have now and look forward and say, well, what are the challenges I'm going to have tomorrow, and build against that. And that's what we do.
You say very bluntly something that very few founders or CEOs have the guts to say, and that is you say American business should be more patriotic.
Well, it's funny. I wonder why, like this, you would think this isn't controversial, and most of the reason people were supplying us with the flames to warm our marshmallows on outside was simply because, it's like we're taking a very obvious position, which is, sure, we can talk about all the things that are, we'd like to improve in America, and there's a lot. It's a big, interesting country. It's been the most important culture since World War II by far. Dominates the most important industries in the world, sure. But it is obvious that everyone in Silicon Valley is in Silicon Valley because something went right with America that's particularly helped us. And I don't know why it's controversial to want to support the U.S. government, especially the U.S. military. An institution which, of course, has been involved in some things that I wouldn't, but in aggregate has made our society more integrated, fairer, trained every part of our culture, been involved in making the world a safer, more decent place, and protects us right now. And why that's controversial in Silicon Valley, I do not understand. Now, I believe I have somewhat of an advantage because I spent, I kind of re-immigrated back to America. I spent a lot of my life abroad in very interesting places I learned a lot about, but I definitely made me appreciate coming back to America and being able to build a wondrous company. It would not have been possible to build Palantir or a company like ours any other place in the world. And that's just like an obvious banality. And it's like if everybody in your insane asylum is insane and you're the one not insane person, which is how they viewed us, maybe it's hard to know if you're insane now. I just think it's like so obvious. But, it's, that's not the way Silicon Valley sees it in private, even though, of course, in public they hire people who say that's how they see it now because they realize that people thought, wow, this community doesn't have the sense God gave a goat, like everyone's getting rich and you're not patriotic at all.
While we're getting a microphone to you, I'm going to ask one more question, so I'm going to bring you into the conversation. Just signal if you have a question while we're getting a microphone to you. Alex, you said something that surprises me, and you said you rely on competition. You rely on your competitors.
Well, we believe, and we've proven with our government product, which was built, is still the dominant product in the world for anti-terror. The kill chain set of products we built, where the core architecture were built decades ago, and then revitalized. Our ability to get products, data from space to operators, and then the Foundry product, which has played an enormous role in the last couple of years, and in America arguably saved hundreds of thousands of lives during the pandemic and powers some of the more interesting businesses in the world. But these products objectively were very, very far ahead of their time, and we're not the best at explaining why anyone would need them. However, you'll find people copying something that's right below our product, explaining to the world that you need this, and then often failing at doing it, and lo and behold, we're there. And we need those people to do it, as annoying as it sometimes is, especially when it looks like kind of a copy. But and that it's like we often, when you're doing something and you're making a big bet, you need people who maybe aren't as good at doing what you're doing, but are much better at doing something else, which is explaining the value of it. And then we, years later, that's how we got our dominant position in parts of the Intel community, and we're getting that in defense, and I believe in U.S. commercial with partners. You're seeing just, I know we're doing crazy well in the U.S. and in Canada, and that's why.
That is wisdom. Okay, jab up a hand if you have a question. We have a microphone right here. Yes, sir, right here. And please just say who you are and where you're from.
Hi, my name is Rajesh Rao. I'm from Singapore. I'm working for a company called Temus. So Alex, my question is at a bigger picture level about AI technologies. Do you think AI is an existential threat for human beings? And what should we be thinking about in that perspective? Thank you.
Well, obviously, as you know, when we say AI, we mean machine learning, machine learning, and essentially autonomous thought. We're not at the last autonomous thought, or there's many different definitions for that. What I think tends to be an existential threat for humanity, and you see this in micro situations currently, is when one side either has a dominant hand or believes they have a dominant hand. I went to Stanford, not very far from here, and you basically learn, this is going to be regulated by the international norms. Yes, international norms work when people are at parity, like what we had post-World War II. They don't work very well when one side has all the weapons and the other side has none. And so I think the primary threat to us is that there's somehow one side gets outside of parity, especially if that side isn't honestly the West. And so, without going into the somewhat classified efforts that we support, partly because no one else in the Valley would, it is crucial that the West stays at parity or ahead. There are different kinds of AI. So the U.S. and the West are not focused, and I believe it's good we're not focused on internal surveillance. So China is the dominant player in internal surveillance in the world. We are focused on the hybrid of weapons, software systems, and how they're used under what conditions, and making those things more autonomous. And I believe that's absolutely crucial, because in a theoretical world, yes, we wouldn't need them, and I don't think there is a danger involved in building any technology. But in the real world, it's going to be us or them who has them, and if we don't have them, then the norms of society will change, and we won't be very happy with how they change.
I'm going to come here next, but while you're getting the microphone to someone, I'll ask you quickly. A precept that you share with Axios is there's a lot of important innovation disruption going on in America outside the coast. Axios has started Axios Local. We're now in 24 cities around the country, including Denver, where you moved your headquarters. What do you think is the importance of the non-coastal innovation in America, the new next influence frontiers?
One of the things that just is a huge advantage to America is that we are the global leaders in tech. One of the things that has historically been a disadvantage is way too significantly over-distributed in a tiny corner of America. And you're seeing people both build new companies outside of Silicon Valley, move outside of Silicon Valley, and then most people rejuvenate their companies with business acumen, deep understanding of their markets, and products that come from all over America, but de facto where the quality of the revenue doesn't move back to Silicon Valley. And that's the crucial thing. Like, you do not want a society where all high-value revenue migrates to the Bay Area. And what we're seeing, what I think this room shows, is the high-value revenue in your enterprise, meaning hybrid software, hardware, business acumen, distribution, does not in any way need to just be in Silicon Valley. I would say, again, what's anomalous is not the distribution across America, where you have many centers of excellence and where you have economies the size of large countries that are one state. It's that this is an American phenomenon, and you would be hard-pressed. We're a global company. I don't see this happening anywhere else.
What have you learned by having your company headquartered in Denver?
I mean, Colorado is a very sane, pleasant place. I like going to work and not having, costs us extra money to roast the marshmallows, but we get to say hi to people on the way, and it's very likable, very sane, things work, very pragmatic, and a lot of industrious, smart people that also want to live in Colorado. It's great.
Over here? Yes, sir?
Yeah, sure. Kairos Aerospace. I think you were talking about how the world has changed. We've seen this departure from the norms, and we've seen it on multiple dimensions. It's like the shocks of the pandemic, the rise of sort of new climate disasters, and the unraveling of the political order. And there's this feeling of people wanting to can we just snap back to sort of normaler and simpler times? But it seems like there's two things happening. It's not just going to a more complex world, but a more complex world that isn't settling into some new static state that maybe is a little more complex than it used to be. Instead, we're in this sort of domain of dynamic complexity where everything keeps changing. And that's a challenge for software. Foundry's pretty well built for that as far as I can tell, but like, do other companies understand the need to sort of have that agility to a changing world?
Well, again, I thank you, former Palantirian. Glad to see you're doing well. Yeah, look, it's like the thing about macro trends that we believe at Palantir is you either acknowledge they exist or you kind of get crushed. And so what I, again, think is very interesting and underestimated in America is Americans, by and large, are not super theological about this. And so you have the ability to adapt to a new world. And it's the adaptation process that can actually make it better. Now, the architecture of Foundry is one that allows you to work on hub and spoke, so you can have a partially harmonic supply chain. You can move the supply chain around. You can do decisions against it. It is ideal for this. But the real value is taking that architecture and putting it in the hands of people that know their business and are adapting to get ahead of these macro trends. And you just see a lot of that in this country, and unfortunately less so in other places. And what I believe will happen is America and hopefully with our help will adapt, and people will then 3 years later copy.
We're about to get the hook. Yes, sir. Go ahead. We'll get you a microphone.
Yeah, hi. This is Neeraj Mitra from Panasonic. My question is more around digital transformation, a lot of buzzword, Industry 4.0 and all. What one caution do you give us when we are doing this journey of digital transformation? One of the reasons why we are here is that Palantir becomes the part of the journey. So what is one caution or one risk you see most important during this
Look,
journey?
the biggest risk in digital transformation, whether it's for a company or a country or a military, is you have to actually have a more businessy view. Is this working? How is it going to get us there? How quickly does it take to get the iterations to work? And the iterations have to move very, very far away from the theory into actual reality. And where you see countries, militaries, companies getting into trouble, it's like just take neutral examples. You have essentially Ministry of Rock and Roll all over the world. It's called Ministry of Transformation. They're giving out billions of dollars to transform their institutions. That creates an internal lobby of people saying that the PowerPoint is actually working. That this is not a PowerPoint exercise. This is like your life is on the line, whether it's your life as an individual or it's your life as a company. And if you don't figure this out, the person next to you will, and they will slaughter you. And it can't be, handing PowerPoints back and forth where the people are being paid. And this is, by the way, more of a risk in big governments. It's like, well, why do so many of these things fail? Why was the assessment of Russia so wrong on Ukraine? Why do so many large programs across the West not work? It's because there's a multi-billion-dollar or in companies multi-hundred-million-dollar project that is passing back and forth things that on paper should work. But someone has to ask the question, well, do they work? And by the way, work, what does work mean? Work is actually transformational. It's not churning your data pool and being able to write something about what you wrote about and how you wrote it. It's not doing a project that only 2 people in your company understand. It's how do we take the business and move it from here to here in a very short period of time. By the way, time. If you want to make sure this isn't happening in your business, take the timelines, cut them in half, or divide them by 5. And you want transformation goals that fail, but at a high level. So it's like, oh, you need 2 years to do this? Great. I want to see it done in 2 months. Because this will surface all the problems. And you see one of the reasons special operators are special operators is because the timelines are tight, the budgets are actually thinner. Special operations communities operate with less money and less time and more constraints. And then compare the output to everyone else. And that's how you have to, that moves it from theory to practice to honesty. And then, as a last addendum, I think another thing that, has really worked in America, works better than other places is, just being honest about, okay, yes, we thought this was going to work, it's not working. It's like, it's super hard to do that. And, just as we've built a number of products. We had a product we built that was a failure. It's like, but it's okay. You just have to kind of acknowledge it. It's really hard, but that's obviously crucial.
Legit, actionable wisdom. Two quick to go questions. One, you're thinking about communication. All our guests here today will be getting a new Axios book, Smart Brevity. It's the secret sauce of everything we've learned in 15 years of building media companies. We started Politico, we started Axios, how to communicate more efficiently, powerfully. At a time we're working from everywhere, and when the generation coming up really cares about higher purpose mission, there's a company down the road that has 1,000 PR people, and yet everyone's curious about Palantir. Why?
Because we deliver. We don't waste our time hiring PR people. And then the people we talk to that know something about it actually know something about it. But it's like, it's really, everybody in the world knows Palantir. Now, if you go to the French subway, you might see death to Palantir. And I'm okay with that. We have strong opinions. We do not shy away from them. When the lawyers come and tell me I can't articulate them, that's nice to hear. And by the way, every year there's no reason. We need funds in the beginning. We don't have any clients. We don't have any money. Then it became, we're a real company now. We have $1 billion, in revenue first half of the year, $1 billion in America, all these milestones. Now we can't tell the truth. We are honest about what we think. We do not get involved in every issue, but if it involves anti-terror war, we're honest. And not everyone likes that. And by the way, that's important. They can't have an opinion if everyone agrees with you.
Going back to those early days, what premium did you place? What is your view of internal communication to your teams, your leaders?
Well, first of all, there's a selection element. And, when your question, of course it's the right thing to say we, but it's actually true. You have the senior, like most of the people who run Palantir, there are a number of them here. You have like Sham and Ted and all sorts of others. We have our leader of Apollo over here. These people have been at Palantir for, a very, very long time. And believe me, I've pissed them off sometimes and almost consistently told them things they did not believe were true. However, I avoid lying to people internally like my life is on it. And do not lie. You don't have to answer the question. Don't lie. We forgive mistakes. We don't forgive lying, treacherous behavior, and the like. And we do, I know people misuse this mission word, but we are believers. And if you want to build a company, you need belief and you need truth. And then you actually have to swallow the pain of, the fact that the person you're working with annoys the hell out of you and deliver.
Just assume positive intent. Axios always ends with one fun thing. I have the title for your fitness book, something you were saying before we walked out. Run like a snail. What do you mean by that?
Oh, yeah. So I, like most rational people, I'm a cross-country skier. And the cross-country skiing is dominated by Norway, and there are lots of reasons, but it's like completely dominated by Norway. It's like American football, and like actually American women are quite good, but de facto, it's Norwegian. And there are many reasons, obviously technical, growing up in snow, but the primary reason is Norwegians run like snails, hours and hours a week, literally, and do intervals twice a week. At least 2 to 3 intervals are below lactate threshold. And so it's completely counterintuitive. It's not that you're running faster all the time. You're running very, very slow and occasionally very fast. And if you do that for 3 years, you end up with a extraordinarily high cardio base.
How's your body fat?
Very low.
Alex Karp, thank you for FounderCon, and thank you for the conversation. Thank you so much.
Take care.